Welcome, everybody, to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. My name is Ben Smith. I'd like to introduce my co-host, the Jamie Cassidy to my Steph Guidi, Curtis Wister. How you doing today, Curtis?
I'm doing great today, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And of course, those are childhood heroes for me in terms of the U Maine women's basketball. But before we kind of talk a little bit more basketball, I want to throw out a quick stat for you.
Mhm.
Well, I bet you know, and of course we all do, Maine has a population of approximately 1.4 million people. Did you know that close to 4.4% of adults in Maine, according to the SAMHSA resources, live with serious mental health conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression? So doing some quick math here, we like to do math as financial advisors. 61,600 people in the state of Maine have some version of a serious mental health condition. And of that population, 45.1% of these adults receive no mental health treatment.
Yeah, and I want to kind of keep going there, Ben. In 2019, a JAMA pediatric study found that 1 in 4 children in Maine has at least one mental health disorder, while nationally that statistic is about 1 in 6, and that Maine has the highest percentage for kids of any state in the study. The JAMA pediatric study also found that nearly half the children and teens with mental health disorders are not receiving care.
Right.
Researchers say among the challenges of treatment, families are concerned about the stigma of mental health and them being able to afford treatment. Experts say there's a severe shortage of mental health providers who treat children and adolescents. So, needless to say, even if we may not be experiencing mental health issues ourselves, there's a very high percentage that someone we know and love is, even if they're not telling us that they are.
Yeah, and I know that's even more prevalent right now, right? As we're still in this pandemic, we have staffing shortages all over the place. We have a very stressed healthcare system. So lots of things are kind of even magnifying. And then this is pre-pandemic statistics we're giving here, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of what we want to talk today is what should we know about how mental health issues present themselves?
Yep.
How should we identify them in ourselves or others? How do we feel the successful team around someone we love that needs help or ourselves? And also, what does the future look like for aging with a brain health issue?
Oh.
Our next guest is an author and elite level NCAA basketball coach. She received a BA from Northwestern University and an MBA from Auburn University and has coached at Maine, Michigan State, and Duke, making National Coach of the Year in 2005 and winning numerous championships at all three schools. She is the only coach in history to win Coach of the Year in 4 different conferences and is now an advocate for mental health and melanoma. But she's also a wife, a mom of 2, Maddie and Jack. She has extensive media experiences on radio shows and podcasts and has provided color commentary for 4 years in the WNBA. She previously published Choice, Not Chance: Rules for Building a Fierce Competitor in her book Secret Warrior, which Curtis and I have both read cover to cover.
That's right.
I think a couple times. Secret Warrior, a coach and fighter on and off the court. I'll show this on video for those that are watching on YouTube. She's written a compelling memoir following her own mental health journey through the realities and challenges within the sports world, using the recurring theme of faith over fear to reduce the stigma associated with impaired mental health and encourage those suffering from mental health issues to reach out to coaches, student athletes, and to all people across the world. She offers real direction, experiences, and personal stories to teach and reassure those adversely affected by the dynamics of the mind and body experience. I know we both learned a lot from her writing here. So motivational, heartfelt, Secret Warrior drives home the need for more education, stories, action, and an overall change to the narrative about brain health. At this time, I'd love to welcome Joanne P. McCauley, Coach P, as our players referred to her, to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. Coach P, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Ben. And it's wonderful. Thank you for having me. And also, Curtis, you as well. So you're a great pair doing amazing things. So it's an honor to be on your podcast.
Well, likewise, we are very blessed and honored to have you with us today. And while we could spend a lot of time talking basketball, and I know we'll weave some of that in, I think the biggest thing we can talk about today is mental health and how we're all impacted here. So first thing I want to ask, we always ask all of our guests, just kind of hear a little bit about you, because I know in Maine, you were a very public figure, but maybe not everyone knows your story. And I don't want to give too much away because I think your book does an awesome job kind of walking through this. But can you talk about growing up in Brunswick, what your childhood was like, and how did you gravitate towards basketball?
Yes, I had a wonderful childhood because my mother decided that Maine was the place to raise the children. I'm a Navy brat. My father was a pilot in the Navy, and we actually were in Maine and then left Maine for Jacksonville, Florida. And my British mom decided that that wasn't going to work. There was a lot of things going on, and after my brother was frisked, and there was different things happening, she said, "No, I'm going to take the kids back to Maine," and she did. My dad commuted from Jacksonville. And I was so fortunate. I grew up with great support. I fell into basketball because somebody, Alan Graffam, the late Alan Graffam, my junior high coach at Brunswick Junior High, he, when I was a sixth grader, indicated that I could be really good. So I had positive reinforcement at that time. Basketball became very important to me, even at sixth grade. And then when I went into high school, Fred Kerber, an incredible man, again, tons of support, which I'm grateful for. And basketball has been a part of my life for 44 years.
That's great.
If you count my playing,
wow,
and count my coaching. And so anyway, I've been very fortunate, and Maine is very special to me. It disheartens me that the suicide rate in Maine for young people is quite high. And the statistics that you just read and talked about, it's very disheartening, and I'm trying to make a difference as much as I can.
Nice.
So I know you just mentioned that Maine is a special place to you. I want to kind of turn that around, and you hold a very special place in the hearts of many of us here in Maine for your time at the University of Maine as the women's basketball coach. During that time, you also experienced your first manic episode. So are you able to just kind of talk about that a little bit with us, and then more generally, what was happening in your life at that time?
Yes, it was a very busy time. I was a young coach. I was hired at 26 years old. And I just, I worked very hard. I had a lot of pride to get the program. The program had been down. And so it was a rebuild type of situation. And I took that to heart, and I worked very, very hard. And 1 year after having my daughter, age 30, which is pretty typical at a time, sure, I had my first episode. I've had 3 episodes total, 2 at Maine and 1 after I left Duke, which no one really knows about, which is fairly interesting to talk about. But my first episode was a manic episode. I did not know that I, in fact, was in a manic episode. I'm a very upbeat, positive person. In terms of the team and people at University of Maine, I looked like a very positive, upbeat person, coaching the team, dreaming big, talking about Final Fours with my team, and trying to reach the highest level. So from their perspective, I was excited and ready to do great things, and Cindy Blodgett and, all of that. And the problem was I wasn't sleeping. And I didn't tell my husband at first. I just thought, wow, I can get more work done. I don't need as much sleep. I was getting, 3 hours, 4 hours, not good sleep. But I was unfamiliar with this. I thought it was okay. And so probably by, the 4th night of this is occurring in a row. And my husband sort of became aware to it, and we talked about it, but yet I was not approachable about it, if that makes sense.
Yep, sure.
Yeah.
So basically, I escalated into a full-blown manic episode, which is in the book, which includes, just this whole idea of denial and fighting my diagnoses and having to be admitted, or I think they called it blue booked, into a psychiatric hospital in Bangor. And I had to receive care, and I had to accept it in my life. And I did accept it finally. I took my medicine, but that in fact led to later my second episode, because at a point I felt that I was fine. I had taken the medicine, and I'm great, right? I'm great. And my doctors, of course, warned me and said, sometimes if you go off your medicine, something can come back at the worst time possible. And that's exactly what happened into the second episode.
And I know we're going to get into lots of things here about the episode and from lots of different angles, Coach P. And I can only imagine too, because especially you're 26 years old. You think of all the 26-year-olds out there that, hey, I'm new in my career. I have a undergraduate, I have a master's degree. I know what I'm doing. I've been at all these programs. I know, all the energy, and I'm going to this is going to happen. And I think we all kind of want to change the world at 26 anyway, right? So I could see where it's like, from a breaking apart, well, was this just natural energy and enthusiasm, or, hey, here's manic, almost overconfident in lots of different ways and not even recognizing kind of the energy that's coming out of you. I want to ask also about Maine women's basketball, asking about what are some of your favorite memories of coaching that program?
Oh gosh, there are many. Beating Alabama, number 10th in the country, undefeated with two All-Americans. That was being down 8-0 to start that game, having to call a timeout and regroup. All the championships, all the conference championships were great. But probably the most memorable is led by Amy Vachon, of course, the current coach.
Right. That's right.
That Stanford victory in breaking through to success in the NCAA tournament and taking Maine to the highest level. And when we played Old Dominion for a chance to go to the Sweet 16, we were in that game to the end. We were on their home floor, and we lost by, I don't know, 9 or 10 or whatever it was. But we took University of Maine and we showed folks what we were. And it was incredible. So not only the Cindy Blodgett years, Stephanie Guidi, that whole group, Jamie Cassidy, and of course, Amy and others, but we had a wonderful group of women that came through at the University of Maine. And I was there for 8 years and very proud of being there for 8 years. People asked me about Michigan State. Part of that too was healing, taking a new opportunity and getting past the 2 episodes that I'd had at Maine and leaving at the right time relative to having a wonderful group, Heather Ernest, and those folks coming in for the new coach, Julie Vayu and others, because Julie coached at Colby. And I must say, though, leaving Maine was one of the hardest things I ever did, was leaving and moving on. It was not easy.
I bet, especially from from the through thread of here you are, you obviously you went out of the state and you found kind of the experience and the skills that you needed to bring back to a program like Maine to make it and lead it to be successful. And I also kind of say is, from a coach, it's also tough, I'm sure, because, here's the kids and the student athletes that are performing for you. And, you can't control what happens in a bad bounce and what might happen. But I got to say, even from just a spectator in that era and just watching so acutely, was just even all the classes that you had come through that program over your 8 years, all the things that were just always stacked against you from hey, you're going to go play Stanford and, or I'm going to go to the NCAA tournament. I'm going to go to California. I'm going to go play across country from Maine, and all the travel issues. And of course, the weather that we have here is not always the most helpful and most conducive to kind of having a great program. So I can just imagine there's lots of things there. And I want to ask you about lessons that you then took from Maine, as you said, about healing personally, going to Michigan State and how tough it is to leave. What lessons did you apply from what you took from that first head coaching job at Maine and applied to Michigan State and Duke?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, so many relative to managing people, relative to building a program. When I went to Michigan State, it wasn't at the bottom, but it was, it was down. And, understanding the patients, but the principles, understanding how to put philosophy into a program and not to go too fast, to make sure the philosophy is in and the expectations are clear. And, the consistency of how coaches have to be. The thing I'm proud about at Michigan State was the biting on, so to speak, right away, being able to get young people to believe and to dream big, Final Four, all that good stuff. And then in 5 years to go for a national championship, literally go from the mid bottom to the Big Ten. And I want to say proudly to represent those women that did such a thing. I've not seen that done too many times before. And we are still, to this day, the last Big Ten team ever to play for a national title in basketball.
Wow.
I mean, that has not changed. There has not been a Big Ten team since 2005. And that was a neat group of folks. Again, similarly, as I took the best Maine players at Michigan State, we recruited the best Michigan players. And we added people, you know, from Nebraska and some other places. But there really was a template from what came from, you know, University of Maine and following through with Michigan State. So, and of course the experience, you know, when I coached against Alabama, Stanford, Western Kentucky, Georgia, remember, we always had an incredible schedule, North Carolina. So all of that experience, plus getting super healthy with my brain, you know, set me up because I had 7 years at Michigan State, not one issue, not one problem. I didn't even have a therapist in Michigan because it appeared that I didn't need one. And my psychiatrist was still in Maine. And I dealt with my psychiatrist via phone. And then I would visit her once a year in August and come up to Bangor and do that. So again, Maine was special beyond special and gave me that chance, you know, to move forward. And, you know, I don't know if it's about moving forward, but it's about change and being able to bring something special to Michigan State.
I like that. So I want to kind of rotate into kind of dive into our mental health discussion here and kind of the meat of this conversation. So to start off, can we just spend a little bit kind of defining what it means to have a mood disorder or to be diagnosed as bipolar? And then kind of a follow-up there is, what does that mean and how does that impact you?
Yes, you know, mental health is to be celebrated. Mental health impairment is to be understood. And a lot of people use the term mental health, I think, in the wrong way, you know, because we're talking about mental health impairment. And there's a spectrum of mental health impairment, all sorts of things, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, manic depressive disorder, schizophrenia, all of them are on a spectrum. I choose to say manic depressive disorder versus bipolar because I think bipolar has gotten kind of trite, overused, and used in places it shouldn't be used, like the weather's bipolar, you know, today, or my teacher's acting bipolar, you know, and in fact, the teacher is not bipolar. And again, it's not who I am, it's part of me, you know, there are triggers, lack of sleep, in my case, and genetics, and they can merge. And sometimes some of these conditions do not get to a point of care. See, I hit rock bottom. And actually, that was a blessing, you know, if you take it through to where I was able to get to with health. But many times there's just sort of, you know, nuances and issues and problems, but people don't get help, don't have a therapist or a psychiatrist. And that's sad. That's really sad for me because that's the undiagnosed that live their lives, their entire lives undiagnosed, and self-medicate with alcohol, drugs, you know, food, and other things. So there's a lot to it.
And I want to kind of keep going. So in the intro there, Ben and I shared some statistics on mental health challenges, you know, both nationally and in the state of Maine. We want to ask you kind of what are you seeing recently and specifically as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all still in?
Yes, well, the Wall Street Journal posted 40% of individuals in our country have some form of depression, anxiety, mood disorder, and so forth as a result of the incredible challenges of the pandemic. And children and high schoolers and adults, it doesn't discriminate based on age. And that's a scary, scary thing. we also don't know the effects of what will happen to these young children with masks, how they will develop, and what mental health impairment will be for the future. So not only are we dealing with something right in front of us, but we also have incredible conjecture as to what is next. And I'm concerned about that. I know many people are. And the suicide rates are sky high. We've had a university right here locally, Carolina, had 2 suicides in the same weekend. I've read about suicides in Maine that just crush me because, I'd love to bring every high schooler together, every bit of Maine together and speak and share my story, not because maybe I could change things directly, but I know that you can kind of divert. You can divert intentions of people that think they're going to take their life. And if you divert, you have an incredible chance for the change of their thoughts or who they might meet the very next day, and have thoughts and changes. So it's disheartening about the suicide rate. And I take a pretty hard stance with it. I will say, as a coach, I speak differently than perhaps just a speaker on mental health advocacy. And that is a very aggressive act to take your life. And I think we need to talk more about it. And again, I'm going to sound a little controversial when I say we got to get past teddy bears. We've got to, don't get me wrong, we have to honor anybody who's gone. But we've got to get past the teddy bear. I call it the teddy bear approach, canceling everything. For example, at a university here, again, with a suicide, they canceled classes. And in my opinion, they should have had classes and taken every class to talk about mental health and mental health impairment.
Yeah.
And, and even use the Ted Lasso approach. Put the suggestion box, the question box out there, and each class, I'm not saying they had to be psychiatrists in each class. I'm saying each professor would have to do a little bit of homework, a little bit of suggestion or question box, and let's talk about this. That would be more productive than anything else, in my opinion.
Well, and Coach B, I agree with that, because there's lots of things that I think from as we're growing up, as we're learning and developing, that look, life is presenting shared and learned experiences. And I know suicide is such a terrible tragedy. But if we can kind of find any at all silver lining of that, is there, it does present an opportunity to, as you're saying, all of us to really look at this and look at the signs and what are the things that are driving us to maybe have those thoughts, or what are the things that maybe lead us to that, and what are some, maybe that was a negative action to be taking, obviously, but what are some positive actions that we could have chosen instead, and why should we not dismiss the negative ones and let's accept these other ones that we should have done. And having those conversations one by one seems like that's to your, I think what you're saying is, instead of just, well, let's go all reflect and just all be by ourselves in silo, and which I know is a natural grieving process for all of us, but to kind of take this as an opportunity and build again, this is, which I think is what we're doing today with your story, is, we could say, hey, woe is me. I had a challenge and I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm just going to sit in it. So I kind of see the parallel, what we're doing today too.
Yes. And I always hope that my messaging can be that you can do anything. You can coach in a national championship. You can win championships. There's every opportunity, because many people feel when they've been diagnosed with a mental health impairment that they are therefore limited. And I had a call from a football player who played in the ACC, and he wanted to get in touch with me. And again, I'm very careful about one-on-one dialogue, because I'm not a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and I don't propose to be, but he said, I want to talk to a coach, and you're a coach with this. And I said, okay, I'll talk to you a little bit, but you need to promise me that you're going to get help. And the good news was he was already under the care of a psychiatrist and he had a therapist. So I was happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, so what's your question? And he said, I don't want it. And I said, that's not a question, that's a statement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you not want?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want the diagnosis. I don't want this. And so I said to him, again, coming from a coaching angle, I said, wow, you played football, right? He said, yeah. And I said, you must not have been very good. And he said, what? I was really good. And I said, oh, you were a player then, you know, a player. And he said, yes, I was a player. I said, okay, when do players quit? And there was silence, you know. And I said, so you're a player? And he said, yeah, I'm a player. And I said, so this is just another one of those things, you know, another adversity, and could be a great story and another thing that you're going through. And we talked for a little bit, again, from a coach perspective. He had already been diagnosed. He had a psych, he had a therapist.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I want to make that clear because, you know, I so respect those professions. And anyway, long story short, after communications, he ran the Boston Marathon. He got exercise back into his life. He got a routine. He started journaling. He listened to me as a coach. And I was able to coach him on patterns of behavior. And later he confided in me that he had gotten out of a relationship. And I'm like, well, okay, that's a trigger, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know, something of that nature. So I've always wanted, not a podcast because I don't, but I've always wished I had a radio show where people could call in and ask questions anonymously to a coach who has this, you know, experience. I mean, let's face it. I've had this a long time, you know, 26 years or so, right? So I've got a lot of stories that I don't try to overtell them, but that have given me experience to talk to somebody like this gentleman.
Well, and Coach P, I want to just highlight a passage that I underlined it. It's one of the last pages of your book. And you said, coaching is seeing and teaching young people or any age person to see their future image of themselves. We never arrive. And I think that's important because I think that's something Curtis and I and our team, Abby and Wes and Chris and Larry, we do this whole showing that mirror to somebody and say, what do you want to achieve? Who are you? What's your purpose? What are important things to you? Because I think what you just said is, hey, here's somebody that says the diagnosis is going to control me and it's going to tell me the things I don't want to be and I don't want to do, and I'm not going to be that. But to show the mirror in front of them and go, okay, well, here's you, but the good and the bad. And let's acknowledge both, and then moving forward with purpose and to live your best life. And I think that's a lot of what you just helped him do there. And again, if you could do that through a radio show in lots of different ways, but I'm sure you've done that for 26 years of coaching, is every person of showing them, hey, here's who you are. We all have limits. We all have things we can't do, but there's lots of things we can do too. And I think sometimes, again, for the population Curtis and I work with our group, there's a lot of people that they've created such hard patterns in their lives that they now think, well, this is me and this is who I am, and I can't change and I can't adapt and I can't do the things I always wanted to do. They've kind of resigned themselves to, I just have this life and that's what I have, and this is what my boundaries are. So I want to ask another question here, Coach P. You said that you had a concern that you would torpedo your career prospects if you disclose your diagnosis. But what worried you most was that you would be a distraction and make it harder for your teams to succeed. And again, as Mainers, we hear that continually from our clients that they don't want to ever bother someone or burden them with our own issues, right? Because we're private and we help each other, we wave and we're nice, but we don't ever burden everybody. It's like a Mainer trait, I guess, that we have. So I could see where anyone working in any career job would share those concerns about, I don't want to be a distraction and I don't want to make it harder on everybody else. So do you think if you're early in your career today and had just received your diagnosis, do you think that today's day and age would change how you previously approached your diagnosis?
Well, it's about the stage, right? The public stage, how big the stage is,
Yep.
and the private community, and also, closer communities. I don't think we've changed enough. I think athletic directors today are always trying to cover for themselves. Right? They don't want any issues. They don't want any problems.
Right.
They're fundraisers, and that's what they do. So they want coaches and they want no problems. And if they don't have any education on mental health and mental health impairment, then they are reluctant and are still reluctant. So even if I was coaching and starting my career, I would not be able to share it for the same reasons I say in the book. To protect the student athletes, because you can see yourself at a media press conference and the questions being, how are you today, coach? How are you feeling?
Right.
And it would be, and that's unfortunately, that's the way it is right now. Yeah. One of the things that people, whether it's an athletic director or anybody else, but an employee, that when someone is properly diagnosed and has medicine, they are their best self. And when you go through this kind of situation, you're more intuitive, you're a better communicator, you understand human action better, and there's an incredible upside, an upside to a person. So investing in mental health across the board, companies or wherever. I mean, I just came from L'Oreal, it's an enormous company, and their headquarters in New York, and they were getting on it and live streaming my talk and really trying to get it out there, because once you're diagnosed and you go through that process, again, you really are more productive. And that is shown in the book to what happened at Michigan State. Mm-hmm. I left Maine. I was told by a few people that you're in for a very special time in your life. And it absolutely was one of the most special times in my life in terms of how I felt. So the future image you talked about, that's very, very real. Mm-hmm. You've got to have it. But these are things that are important. And again, though, I am a public figure. Right. So I do know that somebody running for governor in the past put down their medication as lithium, and that's a tag for basically manic depressive disorder. And I remember looking at that saying, that is outstanding. So in the public arena, say I was governor of Maine, I would share it. Yeah. I mean, I would have been able to share it, and I would have rolled the dice, so to speak, on the acceptance of Maine people, because I would have been in that position. So again, you've got different stages, you've got different situations, you've got different bosses, different corporation, different cultures. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to examine those cultures and find those safe spaces. And to me, Secret Warrior, I could not write it or publish it without getting out of Duke. Right. I had to step away from Duke. I mean, as you know, I had 1 year left on my contract, and I could have stayed, but I had to step away, and I feel so compelled by it, given the feedback I've been given on a daily basis. People coming up to me in my community, phone calls, text, emails, outreach. It's been incredible.
Well, and I think that's something they said for being a leader, right? Is to say, hey, I could keep doing this and I could keep coaching for another 20 years and keep doing everything what I'm doing. But to say, hey, I need to be a leader here, and I want to own my narrative. I want to own my story. And I know you talked about a lot in the book about, I'm very protective about my diagnosis. I'm very protective about someone kind of finding this out and using this against me, or a recruit kind of saying this to me. And all of those, which I could see where, you started your career in, the telephone sales, right? In a telecommunications company. And I could see where, hey, you follow that career path, and all of a sudden you're the top salesperson, and you're driving hundreds of $1,000s of revenue to that corporation, and but as soon as you go, hey, I have a manic depressive disorder, I have a diagnosis, and that's kind of going to be tough, right? Is in lots of different ways. So I think kind of your story putting this out there of, hey, not only can I be effective in my job, I can be a better version of myself in any job, and I can succeed in the highest magnitude with the highest lens focused on me. And that's important, I think, from an example and a role model. But leaders lead from the front and not from the back. And I think that just applaud you for doing that, because it's so tough to do over and over.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And what's sort of ironic is I'm the best coach I've ever been right now. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I say, geez, Joanne, you should be coaching, because of your balance and your space with all of this that's gone on. And then but that thought, dissolves pretty quickly into you're coaching a wider audience. You're coaching,
that's right.
You're coaching everybody. You're coaching nationally. And I was on some international podcasts, one from Germany, which was totally cool. And I don't know these podcasts. I never know like who you reach, right? You have no idea. And I've done so many podcasts, I can't count, and so many Zooms and these talks, from Mississippi State to L'Oreal. I mean, I think that's so funny. I mean, two polar opposite places.
Yeah.
Yet, New York City and Manhattan and Starkville, Mississippi.
Right. And Bangor, Maine. Right. And, it just, who knows where things go. And I think that's the fun part of these recordings is they're evergreen as well. And I just look at from you and your story is to say, hey, now my story is out there in lots of different ways in this culture, in this society, and it becomes a permanent record, not just permanent record for society, but also, hey, for your kids, right. Is to kind of say, hey, here's Maddie and Jack, and they can look in their 40 or 50 years in the future. And it's like, well, what was mom going through at this age? And what was she thinking about? And to be able to kind of say that, and I think kind of pushing your story forward for them and their future generations is so important as well.
Yeah, I agree. And my children have been incredible. Of course, they were too young for any of it, in terms of when Maddie was 2 when I had my manic episode, and then she was 4 when I had my depressive episode. I believe that's right. And Jack didn't come along. Jack came along at when I left for Michigan State, a very healthy baby after having to take lithium during that time. And so my children have caught up, of course, and they, in writing Secret Warrior, they were well into it and understood it. Mm-hmm. And the irony is I could not have written it without my son. I wrote Secret Warrior prior to the pandemic, and then I had to edit it and do so many things with it. But it was my son. I should say I wrote it right as the pandemic hit. The confluence of events was extraordinary. And my son helped me with every element of the computer. And he's mentioned in the book as as an assistant computer specialist, because he's a computer science major at Northwestern. And so I'm like, Jack, literally he had to show me, this is how you set up a document on Microsoft Word. I didn't, because in coaching all those years,
you're focused.
I focused. And of course you delegate tasks and you never delegate relationships. Mm-hmm. Well, those relationships take a lot of time. Recruiting, obviously, your relationships with the team you have in front of you. So I was really good at I'm not going to do like appointments and talks and schedule them. I used my administrative assistant very well to do those things, which meant I didn't get on the computer much. Mm-hmm. And at Northwestern, that was so back in the day. We still use typewriters.
Yeah. You can't say that I've used one of those.
Curtis, you're too young.
He's too young.
Typewriters, with the whiteout.
Oh yeah. Yep. And if you were lucky, you had the typewriter with the whiteout that was built into it. If you were lucky.
Yeah, that was before my time.
Okay.
So Coach B, I want to keep kind of talking about your book here for a second. So obviously in Secret Warrior, I think a really difficult part for me to read about was that first manic episode in the fall of '95. You, as you mentioned, you were a young head coach. You're a mother to a young child, Maddie. Very type A personality, so energized. And as you said, it resulted in not sleeping much at all. And to a point, I think you even said you thought it was good that you weren't sleeping at first, right? Because you could just keep working. So I want to go back to that moment, but kind of from your husband, John's angle, right? So him spotting, your behavior being off and upsetting. And obviously the ultimate answer after a while was to get you help at a hospital here in Maine. I want to know kind of what did you learn about John's process, and having the hospital help you, and why that process wasn't so inclusive to you at the time, right now looking back at it. And how do you think that process would differ today if that kind of severe episode were to take place right now?
Yes, you're talking about the survivors. I try to think of them as thrivers, because John found a way to thrive in the management of my situation. And I think what benefited John is his background.
Yeah.
Chemistry major at North Carolina, master's at Tennessee in economics, and a PhD in economics at Auburn. Through academia and through the sciences, he really, from the day one, it was very upsetting. And what happened in the hospital was so difficult for him in terms of me rejecting him and being furious with him for what he had done to me. And that's exactly how you see it. You take things very personal and you lash out to people you love the most. And that is, my sister was there. I lashed out at my sister. Why did you let him do this to me? All of that was irrational thoughts, and my brain was affected, and I was not well, and I was furious. I was worried about my team. I wasn't as worried about Maddie, only because my sister was there.
Right.
And Maddie was 2-year-old, and I knew Maddie was getting great care. I also know that children can sense things even at a young age. So that's, kind of creepy to think about. But I felt she was in good hands. But I worried tremendously about my team, what they knew, what they didn't know. But getting back to John, he just was a warrior in every sense of the word, and kind of a man but for his time, I guess. I don't know if any people could have been like this, because in that day, mental health wasn't even talked about. And bipolar manic depressive disorder wasn't known at all. Right. And even when I came back to the team, the word I was told to use was exhaustion. Yeah. I mean, there was never a time where the team was told about my diagnoses. And I still to this day feel good about that. I feel like that allowed us to move forward when I came back. But John was, he and I could talk together, and get the survivor side, that because he had to obviously be a person of faith. And I'm not saying faith, I'm saying the wide ranging faith. I mean, you could be a Christian, or you could be, study Judaism, or you could just be an agnostic, or, whatever. You could be an atheist thinking about karma. So I'm talking about, you got to have some faith.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Wherever you grab faith from, because those were such dark times. And I know having Maddie helped John tremendously, because Maddie and my sister and John were taking care of Maddie. And I know that she was a bright spirit and playing and, doing her thing. And I think that was really critical for John. Yeah. I think John's family, talking to his older brother, having family, reaching out. We have some dear friends that we know for years in Bangor that they knew. So it was a small core of people that actually knew. And in the book, as I discuss, Stephen and Tabitha King,
yeah,
it's in the book, and they were incredible.
Yeah.
And so we had some help there. And
I think it's important, Coach B, that look, in what kind of is great is you spend all your time building a team and kind of building a team to produce a certain result on a basketball floor, but also that the team that you're building and the relationships, as you're saying, that you're building, that here's the relationships that came back, right? And those ones that stuck around you, that cared about you. Here's John that probably loved you more than he loved himself in that moment. And I need to make sure that I care for you. But this needs to happen, even though how hard this is probably for him personally, having to be the one to go get you help. And again, he knew where you had to be and what you had to go. But I want to kind of keep rotating here with you, Coach P. We actually had, in a previous episode, we had an executive coach, Elisa Spain, and she talked about that retirement is really a life pivot, and that really, people don't go through just like one change in their life. They work and then they just get done and then they stop working. It's not trading a binge of career for a binge of vacation. That typically there's pivots that happen over our lives, that we change a little bit of what we do and who we are and how we focus over our years. And we can kind of see you've already done this from assistant coach to head coach at Maine to Michigan State and to Duke. And now you've made your largest pivot yet. You've left coaching today. You're writing a book. You're speaking to your life experiences. You're creating, you're creating a foundation. You're talking about Coach P for life. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. You're doing all those things. So can you talk about what you've learned about yourself so far from this pivot? And what are some future experiences you're interested in exploring going forward?
Oh boy, you hit me at a great time with this. The hardest thing I've ever done by far is leaving coaching and leaving that life. And to talk to the group that follows you and talk to the people that are listeners, it doesn't matter that I left coaching for other people. They left corporations, right? It completely goes together. And I have struggled tremendously privately with this. As a matter of fact, I had my third episode and my worst episode. And what's interesting, wow, if I can share with you just the chronology of events. July 1, I step away from Duke. Okay. September 18th, I get a cancer scare. So I have to get a hysterectomy. Okay, that's a problem because that shakes up your hormones and things like that. October 18th, my father passes. And so then I try to recover from all of that, which is normal stuff, right? But even though it's normal stuff, sleep is needed, right? As my psychiatrist always says, okay, you can talk to your therapist about that because she's so cool. But I do sleep. Okay. I do what the chemicals in your brain are doing. And so my sleep patterns, my routine was disrupted. My sleep patterns were different, although I was sleeping and I was exercising. Matter of fact, I was exercising. And I want to tell the listeners that probably saved me for some time, meaning I was making it through August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, all the way around. And what's interesting, when I left my routine, got off some exercise because I went north on vacation in Michigan. I was on vacation when I had my worst episode. And the reason why I want to share that, I guess might be obvious, is that this stuff is strange. The nuances are challenging. Most people would think that, wow, you're golden.
Yeah, exactly.
You're retired and you're on vacation. And how possibly can you have a difficulty? And it was another manic episode. And I had to cope with that. And I had wonderful support, and I did. And obviously we knew a lot more about it because we had gone through it. But just think of this whole thing. Twice at the University of Maine, which was, years ago. I mean, 30 years ago, long time ago. Absolutely no problems with impairment all the way around until June as a 56-year-old. That speaks to the fact of acceptance, knowing about mood disorders and your journey. And if you are diagnosed, to do something about it and to remember that it can still be there. And so again, getting back to your listeners, I empathize in so many ways, and I will challenge them all to routine, to exercise, to better eating, and to reaching out, to journaling, to looking for hobbies, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I move forward, I want to thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I know obviously we didn't know about that third episode, and I don't think a lot, based on the way you kind of prefaced it, I know it's not in the book. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I want to kind of keep going on our conversation here. And so as a successful coach, you worked very hard to not only coach and do well at coaching, but you also identified skills and players and motivations necessary to win games of basketball. So after reading your book, you've done the same around you and with your mood disorder. And so I want to ask kind of what advice would you give to someone either with a mental illness or someone who loves somebody with a mental illness and they want to create their own winning team around them? How would you kind of advise them to kind of do that successfully?
Well, it can be whatever you're comfortable with in terms of the team that you form. Mm-hmm. And the team you form must include medical, therapists, psychiatrists. You must have medical. And I know there are many issues in our country regarding medical. I don't think we have time to talk about all of that. Yeah. But I will say that you've got to be truthful and honest. You've got to listen to those that love you and are around you, whether it's a partner, whether it's your immediate family, whoever it is. And there has to be some good talks about where we are, where we're going, what we're trying to do, and then put it all together. And I think journaling, plus that honesty with family, plus a psychiatrist, plus a therapist, if you can afford it, and that's a whole other issue. But just building, exercise. If you have a wonderful group that you can exercise with. I see this wonderful group at the Y where I swim. There's 20 women in the pool doing pool workout. Mm-hmm. That's more affordable. The YMCA is more affordable, but you've got to seek out all the people that can help you, because sometimes it can be a swim instructor of a program and so you've got to seek out everyone that can help with fitness and be a part of that mental fitness and physical fitness, plus the team you build.
I like it. And I want to ask another question, Coach P. So if you're thinking about yourself here, and what does it mean to care for someone who has a mood disorder or other mental health challenges? For example, so say fast forward for you and a child or grandchild has recently had a mental health episode. How would you advise someone directly caring for a younger person to approach this challenge? Because I'm thinking about, and we're hearing this a lot of grandparents that are now absorbing grandchildren of either from, they've been affected by the opioid challenges, right? Or they're taking in kids and grandkids they're experiencing their own challenges. We just opened up in our introduction about how we're seeing more and more challenges with kids and adolescents. How would you approach that if you were presented with that challenge?
Some of it will be similar to what I've said before, besides the love and care of understanding, listening, of course, finding what passions that person has. For example, if they're an artist or writing or what they're interested in, and meet them at that place. If it's video games, play video games with them, mm-hmm. Meet them at that place. And when you meet somebody at where they're at, you can grow past it, which includes routine, again, exercise, activity, involvement, and perhaps people need, and cooking. I mean, whatever can happen. If I'm an older person, a grandparent or whomever, I've got instincts and I need to use them, but those are some of the actions I can do. And then slowly try to get to where we can communicate about the issue. Now, the opioid, gosh, that stuff is beyond, it's hard to even comprehend that could happen. And then, of course, you've got the medical care, you've got to get it in there. that's why we've got to push about more care, mental health care. Our country, there's a big pivot for our country, and that pivot is healthcare. And I'm an apolitical person. Coaches are that way, because we can't get involved in all of that really when you're a public figure. And so what I would say is mental health impairment and mental health is not political. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what party you represent. And I think our country, has gotten so polarized to the point of not being able to do stuff, and understand what is important. And so a lot of private people like me are trying to speak out and raise a red flag. And I see that with Simone Biles. She's coming out with all sorts of initiatives for what she went through with gymnastics. And there's a point I have to make about this. When you have an impairment, it is not about making up an excuse. Okay. The reality is, it's a very real thing, and it must be dealt with. And I think there are some in our country that are sort of like, well, I'm not sure that's really what that is. I saw some of the comments with Simone Biles, and to not remember what those gymnastics gals went through, and to not understand that could play out at any time. And usually it's when you have to do the biggest thing. To go back to Simone Biles as an example, I said to John, when she said, I will represent all the women that went through that horrible experience for their lives, I said to my husband, she is in trouble before the Olympics, because there is no way you can carry that kind of responsibility, burden. And she looked like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I just applaud her so much for what she did and is doing currently. And of course, there are people that could never understand that. Right. She stepped away from the Olympics, blah, blah. I was obviously passionate about understanding what she had gone through. I don't know her personally, but you can watch from afar, and I could relate as a mentally impaired person of the past, I should say.
Yeah. Well, and Coach P, I want to ask, just kind of in summation, kind of going forward for our listeners, I'd love for you just to tell us a little bit about Coach P for Life, the work that you're doing right now, and how you're speaking out. Because obviously you got the book right now, but also you're doing lots of talks. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of an update on where you see this going for you?
Well, I'm not totally sure. Okay. Coach P for the number 4 life is my social tag. For all my social, and coaches always do things with purpose. And so Coach P, that's obvious, but 4 represents, I'm a Final Four coach, and that's something I'll always cherish. And life represents living life, not choosing to end your life. So that's where Coach P for Life comes from. Love on it. The social. So we're working with that. Then there's the Coach P for Life LLC that feeds into Secret Warrior Foundation in the future, not currently because we have to build, but Secret Warrior Foundation and for brain health. And so that's what I hope. If I could wave a wand, I would continue to do podcasts. I would continue to speak. I would have a radio show. And I wish there was some corporation, somebody out there listening or know somebody, because I've put it out there. I put my story out there. And I think I've also done enough podcasts and things like that for someone to see what I'm representing. And so in a dream world, somebody with a lot of resources says, we're going to do this and we're going to support this. And then it would be a question answer. You could call anonymously. I would have the information for the mental health hotlines and everything that's needed. And I could encourage, because the biggest problem with mental health impairment is certainly not diagnosing it. And even when it's diagnosed, people not taking their medicine. And then, of course, healthcare. Yes, I would like to be a part of any initiative and be testifying in Congress or anywhere that it's not where it needs to be, coverage and what happens. And so we have a long way to go there.
That's awesome.
So we have kind of a wrap-up question for you, Coach P. So obviously the name of our show is the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. So we like to ask everyone kind of how are you going to find your personal retirement success when you kind of get to that pivot, if you will, in your life?
Well, here's the key. Never retire.
Okay.
In your mind, never retire. Yes, you've said it. It's a pivot, but we're living life and we're not done. Mm-hmm. And just because, we left a company, okay, that's great. Tutor a young person, volunteer at your church, be a speaker or a coach or a advocate or, have a book club, take your pivot, but take the mentality. I'm going to call it the no retirement mentality.
Like it.
And because we don't stop, just like anything, you can't stay, you just can't stay without motion. Okay. We're about motion. So I hope everybody listening can feel that energy and find their way to something exciting and never, ever retire.
Well, Coach P, I think those are some great words. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know on behalf of Curtis and I, it is such an honor and a privilege to have you on our show talking about mental health challenges, your story, and how we all can learn from it. So we really can't thank you enough. It's been just a great honor, and we'll hope to catch you next time. So I have to put a shout out there. Our good friend, listener of the show, Barbara Higgins, was the one that connected us to Coach P. Yeah. So Barbara has actually been a good friend of mine for some time, lives in a similar neighborhood as me, and was an assistant coach for Coach P. Yep. So she said, "Hey, Coach P, my friend in Ben and Curtis, they have a really great show, and I think it would be a great mix." So what a nice thing that Barbara did for us there and connecting us with Coach P, because she is a delight. That was a fantastic conversation to have. So Curtis, what was a takeaway that you had from today?
Yeah, I think honestly the whole episode, right? I mean, this whole conversation, Coach P's book, I highly recommend to anyone, and I know we'll make it clear of how people can get their hands on it here in a little bit, but just the overall and this mental health discussion and how important it is to raise awareness and to have acceptance, to get past the stigmas. And right, we're not gonna make any progress just as a society in helping people or helping ourselves if nobody talks about it. You got to make a plan. I think Coach P did a great job, really obviously being vulnerable and sharing her stories. It's incredible what she's done, and just really kind of using her experiences to help in this next phase of her coaching. Honestly, I know she said she's done coaching, but she's still coaching, and she's just coaching a lot more people. So I think it was such a great conversation. Obviously, she's fantastic, and just, yeah, I mean, I don't think I could pick one thing to take away other than just the importance of that conversation we had.
Well, I think in the statistic I know we read in the intro is 45% of adults receive no mental health treatment, right? And yeah, I think that's the unacceptable statistic here is, yeah, hey, is finding out, kind of as you're saying, hey, raise my hand. I just need help, and going and talking to the medical side, talking to, your support group and finding ways to just better ourselves. And she said, I'm the best version of myself that I've been, even acknowledging where my manic depressive disorder is, figuring out kind of that balance and the right medication. I'm the best person. And she says, I'm the best coach that I've ever been today. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something where, I think, she's saying on the football player, him raising his, I don't want that diagnosis, right, versus, hey, accepting the diagnosis. And I know what we're talking about is accepting and conquering mental health challenges today is like, once I kind of accept it and I find the team around it to build, and I find ways to cope, man, now the future is unlocked for you. And I think that's a really important thing. So I just want to take a second and kind of highlight a few resources that Coach P is sharing with us. One is, as we said, the book, and I'm holding that up for the screen right now for those that are watching or listening, is that you can get this on Amazon. We're going to have the link to buy this on Amazon if you want to check it out. Again, it could be Kindle, by the way. It can be electronic or a Dead Tree book version of it there. Coach P has a website. It's coachp.org. And also, we're going to put our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn pages there for you to follow. We reached out to our friends at Northlight Health Acadia Hospital. They're able to give us some really good resources about learning some more. So if you want to go a little further here and hear a little bit more what's out there in Maine and some things to learn about maybe before, if you know somebody that needs help, that before you make a call, that's all there and all the quick references. So we are going to share all that on our show notes. So if you go to blog.guidancepointllc.com/57 to find more of our conversation with Coach P, and again, conquering mental health challenges. Again, so thankful to have this show today. Again, we talked about cognitive decline and impact on your finances last episode. Kind of a good, I think, especially in winter in Maine. I think there's and holidays are really tough, right, on all of us. So I think there's lots of theming here that I think makes sense for the release that we're having here. So really appreciate everyone tuning in. If you're the first time that you've tuned into us, well, hopefully you go back to the library and find a few more shows that you might kind of pick something up on too. We're really excited to continue doing this podcast for you. If you have any comments or suggestions, I'd love to hear from you, but we will catch you next time. Take care.